Start film in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to David Cronenberg's Rabid, his second theatrical release starring Marilyn Chambers as our main focus character. It's a very interesting film. It has a particularly interesting take on vampires. Well, you wouldn't think this is a vampire movie. There are a lot of similarities, as you will see throughout, because this character has to feed on human blood to survive after her accident. And as we see these two characters going through a bike ride through the Quebec countryside, it's a really well shot sequence, very nice camera work. And originally, when I watched this film, I wasn't sure if I would enjoy it or not. I was kind of hesitant, but the movie really won me over. It's fantastic for those of you who have seen it, and presumably you would have seen it if you are listening to the commentary track. But if this is your first watch, I welcome you to really enjoy this film, and I appreciate you choosing my commentary as your first experience of the film. Of course, definitely watch the film with regular audio and whatnot. Of course, this was also before David Cronenberg started working with Howard Shore, as that wouldn't take place until The Brood. It's still got a nice soundtrack to it. Of course, if you're a fan of David Cronenberg and have watched his films, chronologically, this gentleman here, of course, was seen in a somewhat important role in Shivers, David Cronenberg's first theatrical film. My apologies. So here we have this sort of meeting between a doctor and his associates for funding and talking about how this clinic is doing financially, as they're hoping to be able to secure some funds and make sure that the clinic can stay profitable and operational. So here we have our couple just driving along. You get these really nice bike shots. Of course, David Cronenberg was a motorcycle enthusiast at the time, and a lot of the motorcycle sounds actually came from his Ren Max. They weren't exactly recorded while driving. So that's nice. And here we're about to see the conflict of the film, or the opening conflict, as this couple is lost. And also, the road is just a little too small for their vehicle to take up one side. So they're kind of taking up the entire road, which is really rather unfortunate. I don't know if roads like this still exist, where they're so small. At least that's how it appeared. But of course, they're not taking up the entire road as they were pulling to the side, so it's really hard to get a feel for that and to see that. But of course, his car or their van has now stalled, and they're kind of blocking the road, which is really rather unfortunate. And here they see the bike, and they're just going a little too fast to be able to stop. They hit the jump, the bike crashes, and we see our character here trapped under the bike, and unfortunately the bike explodes, as we see all that action there. And of course, just as she flips the helmet up, which probably wasn't the best move, and surprisingly, she's still conscious after that explosion. So these two have seen the accident. Of course, they're just there for plastic surgery, and they get a hold of the doctors. Of course, the clinic is not able to handle that, but of course, the problem is they're too far out from the city to get to a proper hospital, so they're going to have to do whatever they can to save their lives and to treat their injuries. course, we don't know the severity of the male's injury. Of course, this character, Bob, is trying to put out the fire as best as he can, but of course, we don't know if there's going to be a second explosion or anything. So here we have the doctor and the ambulance about to rush out to the scene. Interesting choice for an ambulance. I've never seen a green ambulance, so I don't know if these are real or not. If anybody can confirm if there were green ambulances in Canada during the 70s, it'd be interesting to see. I've tried Googling and couldn't find anything on it. But an interesting color choice nonetheless. It certainly shows the vehicle, so you definitely know that this is important and very hard to miss as compared to the white vehicles. Of course, ambulances today also have sirens, so they're not very hard to miss, regardless. And so they've been loaded into the ambulance. She's losing quite a bit of blood, which is unfortunate. And we find out that he only has a separated shoulder, so he should be fine. But she's just losing too much blood. So they're trying to make sure that she's stable enough to get to the clinic. And here we go. They've come back. And ironic, the jogging kills sweater. It's just a bit funny. I don't think jogging actually kills. I just think that he might be a little bit lazy, but still, it's a fun pun sweater, you know? Again, the makeup effects are quite good in this film. There's a lot better effects coming, as we'll see eventually. And again, trying to make sure that they get her to the operating room as fast as possible, and also still make sure that he's okay, as he's in a bit of pain, as he still has a separated shoulder. I imagine those are quite painful. I've never separated anything, but they can't be comfortable. And this gentleman in the robe here, he's also in David Cronenberg's Shivers, but he's also in David Cronenberg's first film, Stereo. Of course, he isn't seen much in Rabid, unlike Shivers, but there's still it's still nice that David Cronenberg collaborates with many actors, as throughout all his films, several actors kind of return, whether it's The Brood. There's an actor in that film that comes back for Scanners, and then there's an actor in this that comes back in The Brood. I forget his name, however, and I apologize. And I'm not sure if anybody from this film comes back in Fast Company, as I've never seen Fast Company, so my apologies there as well. But there's always somebody that was in the previous film that shows up in the next film, at least from what I've seen. So here we have the doctor explaining that he's going to be doing an experimental procedure that has not been done, but it should do the trick to save her life and make things much easier. A sort of grafting technique. Of course, I know nothing about medical science in the 70s, and I don't exactly know how sort of functional grafting of skin is back then. I don't even know how well it goes now, but I assume that science has evolved enough to the point where skin grafts are fairly easy and fairly harmless in comparison. But again, this is a life-saving situation, as she was dying on her way to the hospital, so this could be something entirely different. I also don't know if eyelids move during surgeries or not. I myself have had 7 surgeries, but again, none of them have been filmed, so I'm not sure if they move throughout. And again, a bit of a gory scene here as they're starting to take some skin to graft on new skin. So, hopefully, this technique can work and save her life. But as I've sort of spoiled in the beginning, we know that she survives the surgery. But there's some interesting side effects. So here we are a month later. Again, not too much surgical scenes in the movie. And it appears that she's been unconscious for about a month with no signs of waking, but we do see that there is some movement, so we know that she's alive. She's just been somewhat comatose for that entire time. And here we get sort of an update on her condition. And we find out that she's recovering. It could just be a while before she wakes up. And the no magic comment. So, hopefully, Rose wakes up at some point. As we now have the character's name. As before they were nameless. And here he comes to say goodbye to Rose before heading back to the city. Oddly enough, as we'll see here in a few moments, the motorcycle's been kept around. I'm not exactly sure. It's been trashed, so I doubt it's repairable. So I'm surprised that they just didn't send it to a junkyard or something. And then we have to kiss goodbye. I mean, granted, I don't know if hospitals have the means to get rid of mechanical or motorized vehicles or anything. Yes, as we find out his hand, and then we find out that he has to go to the General Hospital in Montreal. Hopefully everything goes well. And the gentleman in the hat is an interesting fellow and is about to meet some unfortunate side effects later on in the film. Or unfortunate fate, I should say. Yeah, so they're pretty much a cosmetic surgery, a hospital, or I don't know if I would call it a hospital, if I would call it a clinic. Obviously, they can do surgeries, but I'm not 100% sure. And again, trying to do a little comedy to lighten the mood. Whether it works or not is another story. And here we are at the clinic at night. Oh, I'm trying to remember, but this building is actually a sorting. It's a factory for something. I think it was, if I remember correctly, it's a juice plant, I believe. I could be wrong again, and I apologize. Or is it I seriously can't remember. But I'm pretty sure that I remember it having something to do with beverages. And here we have him looking at his eyes to see how well the job was done. And Rose is up. Probably a bit of shock, being unconscious for about a month. And then just popping up awake. Now, of course, Meredith Chambers was not the first choice for the role. Originally, David Cronenberg wanted as I can never say her name without getting tongue tied. Sissy Spacek, but the girl who played Carrie, to play the role of Rose, but the studio didn't like her accent, so Marilyn Chambers, got the role, and of course, Marilyn Chambers is actually or was a porn actress before this, and also this would be her only major film role. This this is where we kind of get our first sort of look at vampiric activity, so to speak. Like I said, it's an interesting take on vampires because it's not your stereotypical bite you in the neck and suck your blood type thing. I shouldn't say suck your blood because it still has that essence, but it's a bit different. We don't quite see it yet, but she's drinking the blood of this gentleman, as we'll see later, what is penetrating her victims. But we see that the bleeding, and it looks like she's doing better, and it's going into her, as we kind of see there with her arm. And then, as she continues to drink, you can see that she's feeling a bit better and rested as she kind of tries to console her victim by rubbing his head. So we've seen the first victim of Rose. The film doesn't completely take place in the clinic. We eventually do leave the clinic and head towards the city. Of course, we now see the victim regaining somewhat of consciousness, and she sees the blood on her glove. But he has no recollection of what's happened. And we see through the magnifying glass just how deep the wound is. But he has no recollection of what's happening. And we can see that there's quite a bit of blood loss. And then we find out that he can't feel his arm and how it's completely numb. And that there's no claws, so basically he's just constantly bleeding. But it doesn't seem to be too severe to where he'll die. He's just constantly bleeding. Again, I'm not sure exactly how bodies work and if you can move them without. Well, I do kind of know. When it comes to not having any feeling, it's movable, but you're not exactly sure when you're moving it. Just a small thing about me, I have cerebral palsy, so I have limited to no feeling in my right arm and leg, so I can kind of give some information about having no feeling but still being able to move limbs. And so we have a bit of a mystery going on about what's happening here, as nobody's really sure what's happening. And there you see the blood all over the painting. And of course, it's seeming like she still hasn't woken up. But of course, we, the audience, now know that that's not the case. She isn't, in fact, awake and moving. Though it is a bit weird. again, and I'm not 100% sure if she's playing I'm going to be unconscious or if she is actually unconscious and it's only at night that she wakes up at first. And of course, you sort of get this addiction to cosmic surgery. Some people say that once you start, you can't stop, so you just keep constantly trying to look for improvements, thinking that something is wrong. And here we see that Rose has awakened once again, and she's kind of running away from the clinic. Of course, she's looking for feeding time, and she's kind of hoping that she doesn't have to feed on only humans. Obviously, that can get a bit problematic if you have to keep eating or drinking humans. So she's looking for something to feed off of, and she sees sort of this barn here to go inside, and she's hoping that she can hopefully feed off of animals or something, which is hopefully her solution to the problem, because, again, eating humans is not exactly acceptable and kind of super problematic, as we are also going to see later on, as her feeding actually has some unfortunate side effects for her victims. But that's a bit further into the film. So here we see her start to undress as she has to expose her arms, at least, or some sort of skin, so that she can feed. Petting the nice cow, sort of showing care for the cow, and then she goes in for the feed as she snuggles next to the cow. And the cow makes no noise, which is kind of incredible. But unfortunately for Rose, animal blood is not what she unfortunately needs, as she starts to vomit. So now she realizes that it has to be humans. And then we get this asshole. Oh, a human being, you asshole. But he's about to get his comeuppance, so it doesn't matter. Again, one of the appreciations of horror films is that most victims are assholes and deserve it, which is great. Well, for the most part, they're people who deserve it. And of course, she kind of goes into the seduction. But little does he know, he's in for a rude awakening. She starts to console him, and then pop, stabs him, and is able to feed. Only a bit, though, and then she runs away. For whatever reason, he has his bike still around. It's rather bizarre because I don't know if I would keep a bike like that around. I don't even think it's repairable. I think once it explodes, you're done for. Of course, enjoying a beer, and she escapes back to the clinic without her coat, and just kind of sneaks back in. So that's a thing. Very interesting that there's Well, I suppose it is the late 70s, so I don't imagine that security cameras are everywhere. So that could be a case of nobody knowing what's going on. Of course, the 70s was also the era of not locking your doors as well. Here we have the phone ring. And it's hard to say how cold she is at this point, given how wet she is, as it was raining. Can't hear a damn thing. He's just got his music going and looking at his magazines. She's just kind of trying to find someone to contact. Now, this gentleman here appears in 4 Cronenberg films that I have seen. Of course, Rabid, The Brood, Scanners, and The Naked Lunch are 4 of Cronenberg's films that he appears in. He is quite the comedic actor. Though I don't think he's actually in any comedies. I haven't seen his complete filmography, but I do know that he's always playing somewhat of a funny character in each of Cronenberg's films. And so he heads out. He appears to be back in the city now as well. He still doesn't seem to have feeling back in, which is why he was there. And then we have the third feeding time scene, because obviously that little morsel wasn't enough to fully take away her appetite. It's kind of amazing that she is able to just walk. I would imagine after a month of being unable to move, it would be a bit difficult. And there's a sense of urgency or fear over the situation. She can tell that maybe not everything's okay. And of course, the urgency to feed takes over. And one thing I can kind of appreciate about this scene is the fact that the whirlpool is not completely turning red with blood. It's kind of interesting because normally when you have a death scene or a violent scene, you kind of have the entire pool filling with blood. We can kind of see that there is some bleeding, but it's not the entirety filling with blood. And here we get the first scene of the side effect of becoming one of Rose's victims. As they sort of become rabid-esque monsters, sort of just losing control. And that car definitely saw some better days. Well, if they weren't dead before, they're definitely dead now. It was quite the crash. Finally, a phone gets through. So she's looking for any help that she can find because she doesn't know what's going on, so she's scared. She doesn't exactly want to drink people. She just knows that she has to drink people. Reed is looking for a way back to the hospital. It is what it is. And here we have the doctor finally seeing Rose awake. This would be a giant mistake. Never go in alone. You think everything is fine, but far from it. A lesson that not many horror victims seem to know. It's a definite trope, that's for sure. A trope that I have brought up in the past as well. Again, she's scared. She doesn't want to feed off people, but it's something that she has to do because nothing works. Animal blood doesn't work. And as we'll also see later, neither does food. But I think she knows that at this point that food just won't work. But she also doesn't know how to talk about her problems because people would think she's crazy that she has to feed off of people's blood. Who's going to believe her? And here we have the I'm a monster speech. It's not really a speech, it's more of a sentence. But she knows that she's a monster. And then we have the cute baby. Unfortunately, this is the only time that we see the baby. Of course, any programming scene in the movie is just stuff that the studio had available. So they didn't have to pay for any licensing fee. And I guess a tomato and a potato is something a child would watch, I suppose. It's very weird that he just goes, "From Rose!" Like this weird dramatic way of saying Rose instead of just repeating, "From Rose." Again, answering machines are all tapes in the early 70s to the 90s, even. Interesting that he says an hour. I don't know if an hour makes much of a difference. Again, I don't know what time of day it is either, as it's never specified what time it is. The only thing that we do know is that it's a 3-hour drive to the clinic from Montreal. And here we can see that Reed really does care about Rose. And here we see the doctor looking. And he sees this great makeup effect of the orifice here. It's all very confusing. And how it doesn't hurt. And then you see sort of palpitation of, I don't know what to call it, but the organism that allows her to feed sort of coming out and being visible. And this is how we find out that she can't eat food, because if you can't take an intravenous, it's quite possible that you can't take food because basically an intravenous is kind of like food when you're in surgery. So you don't feel hungry when you're hooked up to an IV. Personal experience. And then there you go. She stabs into him so that she can have another drink. This is why I say it's an interesting take on a vampire, because that's essentially what she is at this point. She has become a vampire, and a vampire that unfortunately has some extra side effects to her victims. So here we have Reed and Murray driving back to the hospital, having a bit of coffee, and we have sort of this hurried, rushed music, which is a bit odd because there's no sense of urgency for them to get to the clinic at this point. And here we see the next sort of transformation into this insane being. And you sort of see his bleeding from the eyes. He steals food because he just doesn't care. The attack begins. You see his eye. And then cannibalism. If that was a shaving cut, I'd be impressed considering it's on the right side of his neck. I suppose. Yeah, I believe that's the right side. It could be the left side. But on the side of his neck. I don't think hair grows on the side of your neck. Again, I could be wrong. And here we see him slowly succumbing to the effects of the infection, if you will, as it seems that Rose's feeding times infect her victims, as we can clearly see now. Although it's never stated how long the effects seem to take, as her first victims seem to have taken a while to take effect, whereas these next two seem to be in much more rapid succession. And then you see the infection has taken over as his eyes have started to see that familiar yellow goop that we saw with the last gentleman. And for some reason, they get insanely violent as he tries to cut the finger off and then starts to eat from the hole as he's taking or attacking everyone else. And so now they're trying to run and escape. And then Rose knows that she has to get out of here now. So now she finds the perfect opportunity to escape. She rips out the IV and runs as fast as she can to a closet to put on some clothes. Never really stated whose clothes these are, but it's possibly just the nurses and the doctors' clothings. And now we're starting to hear news broadcasts about the infected getting out and attacking people. And we find out that her victims are actually dying. So they're not living in these insane states. They're dying. It's unknown whether they're infecting other people as well at this point. So here we have Rose hitchhiking to get to the city. And she gets a ride from a trucker, as we can see here, which is good luck. Meanwhile, the other two are slowly making it to the clinic where Rose is no longer around, which is rather unfortunate. And again, the green ambulance reappears, and a lot of police cars. From what I understand, when filming, they actually only had access to 2 of them, so they used clever shots to make it seem like they had more. So that's sort of a bit of film information for you about filming. And then here we have Murray finding out exactly what's happening. And of course, Reed is trying to find out what happened to Rose. And nobody has any information because, of course, she left in the chaos to head back to the city. And now they're showing Reed the corpse of the girl that Rose had eaten beforehand. So yeah, Murray's about to see Dr. Kelloyd in his insane, bloodlustful form, or rage-induced form, if you will. It's hard to say which one you would choose, but all of them really apply. And then you have this doctor trying to repair or help the police officer that was attacked as they tried to get Dr. Kelloyd into the police truck. Call it a truck, because that's not really a police van now, is it? Sort of mocking the situation, kind of. Yes. That is no longer your friend anymore. That's just the insanity. There's no Dr. Kelloyd here anymore. He's just gone insane. And here we have the officer showing Reed the corpse. I'm a bit surprised that Rose was able to drag this person into the freezer. Of course, that image was also used as the original poster for the film as well. She's offered a bite, and so she obliges. And I think she wants that sort of normalcy. She wants to try to see if she can eat. But of course, as we're about to see, it's not quite the case. She's definitely putting on an act here. And then we find out that they have to pull aside so she can vomit, which is rather unfortunate. She can't eat food. As I'm sure if she could, she would. Get it all out. Another Canadianism, however, not as Canadianism as some other movies. So it's not super blatant horror yet, but we've definitely seen the horror aspect of it. We've seen the transformations, we've seen her needing to feed, but we also know that unlike the traditional vampire, she doesn't just only work at night. She can work at any time of the day, and there's no need to sleep at any possible point. And of course, we now find out that she has fed once again as she has taken a bite out of her driver. And of course, there's that memory loss again where they can't remember exactly what has happened. It's a bit weird that for whatever reason they get memory loss, but I mean, it works for that. It works in Rose's favor because no one can pinpoint her as the person causing these issues. So the police officer is now letting the driver go, as it's just a misunderstanding of her, or of him, sorry, having to just doze off and go to sleep. And Rose has found her next mode of transportation. So she has found her way to Montreal. And then the real trouble starts. For one thing that Montreal is the fact that it's the largest city in Canada. Until 1996, and then Toronto took that spot. And here we have sort of a medical doctor who is a sort of head of medicine, or virus. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but he's sort of the head of that. Again, this movie may not be the best thing to watch during a pandemic, which in this current day we are currently still going through, as you're just seeing people go a bit crazy. So now we find out that Reed and Murphy are kind of stuck in this location because they're trying to limit traffic, keep people from traveling to make sure that they're okay. And then we find out that Rose is coming to stay with a friend of theirs. And here we have sort of the most massive infected area, as the truck driver has come back and to this depot, and there are a lot of people around this depot. And again, kind of finding out that he seems a bit sick. And of course, we have heavy French accents, of course, being in Quebec. So, heavy French English accents. And of course, as the movie progresses, the violence becomes more and more prevalent. So they're trying to find Eddie and no one can find him. And here he comes. And again, they have more violent outbursts than anything. So it's definitely looking like the infected aren't causing infections for others. They just seem to get violent and want to kill. And here is the most adorable character in the film. So it's really sad. You can tell that she's just somebody who cares about her friend and just wants the best for them. The main problem is. So, Quebec Bureau of Health is his exact title. So, he wasn't the head of Canada, but he is the authority here because the infection is all over Quebec rather than the world or the country. But they are afraid that it might infect the entire country. So, he sort of becomes this authority on the matter. And of course, they're thinking it's a mass rabies like infection. Little do they know. So, yes, they go into a coma and then die. So, it's not like the infected are going all over the place forever. They're slowly dying on top of that, which is rather unfortunate. So, yeah, stay away from people. And they're trying to use the rabies shot to possibly be a cure. And here we have Rose, and they're just overjoyed to see each other. Meanwhile, Reed and Murphy are back at this sort of checkpoint area where they have to spend the next 2 days. So Murray's just going to do some paperwork. And Murray's trying to sell his paperwork as something interesting and great. And of course, he's exhausted. He probably hasn't gotten a lot of sleep. And of course, he's a bit shocked at how all of his co-workers are dead and business partners. And here we have the next infected. So yes, in fact, we now see that the infection can spread from not only Rose, but those already infected. Quite the shotgun blast there. If he wasn't dead before, he definitely is now. And the little "Dick was here" written on the wall. And now we see that the shots don't work. Oh wait, that wasn't a previous infected. My apologies. That was the one who got bit at the clinic. My apologies. And Rose just wants to go out for a bit. And there's that concern because of the infections. Again, she just simply cares about her friend, but also Rose cares about her to the point where she needs to go out to feed. Like I said, you can see the care between the two friends, and they just want what's best for the other. But unfortunately, one needs to eat, and she doesn't want to have to eat her friend. So here we see the theater, and eventually we'll see a photo shot or a poster of Carrie, which was unintentional. I think it was playing at the time, but they definitely put it in the shot to sort of be like a sort of reference to how Cronenberg wanted Sissy Sate. I can't say her name, but wanted that actress to play the role Rose. So there's that sort of nod to that. But David absolutely loved Marilyn Chambers in the role, as she did a fantastic job. I don't know if Sissy Sate, my apologies again for screwing that up, but if she could have played Rose, as well as this. Again, Marilyn does a fantastic job. So here we have this sort of slime ball thinking that he's hunting his next prey, but in fact, little does he know that he is about to become the prey. You sort of have this exchange, and of course, I'm not sure the film it's playing, but again, it's another studio film, so there was no need to worry about licensing fees or anything like that. And again, it's the hunter is about to become the hunted. Of course, we never see what happens to him as she leaves after the feasting happens. And also, I don't know if you witnessed that if you saw the price of the movie, $3.25. We are long past the days of that. I think it's $20 for a movie, although there is this thing in Canada where you can see a movie on Tuesdays for about $6 or thereabouts. So it's not quite super priced, but that's also because nobody's going to theaters anymore. And of course, I'm talking pre-pandemic here. I think theaters were on the decline then, as they are now, at least in Canada. I'm not sure about the United States. I mean, even when I went to see movies, there weren't a lot of people there. And if you went to a drive-in, it'd be like $18 for the car. Didn't matter how many people you had in the car. Of course, when the pandemic ends here, I don't know if I'll go into a theater or not. So here we have this creep thinking he's won, but he's about to get a rude awakening. So he's about to put his hand and prick the spot, and she's getting ready to feast. And then we see sort of that there's this needle prick in there too. Both in color. And then he's just standing or sitting there, unaware of what's happened, but kind of also in a daze. And it's really unfortunate, as there's all those people sitting in that theater with him, unaware of the danger they are in. Again, it's never a deep cut or anything, or a serious cut. It's just a cut. And of course, one thing you may not have been aware of, and there's the Carrie poster, by the way, is that this movie is a Christmas movie, as we'll see later on. Yes, we had the holiday wreaths, but there's a certain something that's going to be seen. And then you see that she's starving and sweating and really needs to eat. But she definitely doesn't want to eat her friend, so she's suffering in the bathroom, waiting for her friend to leave. And yeah, the good luck. So she has no idea of the pain that she's in, but she's luckily got this opportunity to head out to get a bite. But of course, now we see how rapidly the infection is going through the city, as we'll see in the subway scene. Definitely the most visual representation of how fast this infection is spreading. Now, Montreal, interestingly enough, does not have a subway system that goes all through the city. it only has about 5 or 6 stops because it's only for a small portion um, of the city. At least that's what my cousin tells me. I haven't lived in Montreal since I was 5, so I don't quite know the entire layout, but my cousins have been there their entire lives, so they know the layout of sort of the transit system far more than I do. And then we have this lady sort of eating people, and of course, they're trapped in this enclosed space, and it seems like it gives them a lot more strength so they can sort of resist better. And so now everyone is panicked, and you just see this maniacal look on her face as she's proud of what she's done when it comes to biting the victim. So now everyone's just trying to get the hell out of there. And then they're speaking about how things should be taken a hell of a lot more seriously. But also, there's somewhat of this, we can't just shut everything down, that would be crazy. And of course, these two gentlemen here are apparently famous Canadian stuntmen. They appear in, I think, a few. Yes, they appear in a few of Cronenberg's early movies. And as you can see, they've been infected here as they are trying to kill people and have stuck that jackhammer right in the driver's leg. So he's trying to climb over to get control of the vehicle. And so they can get the hell out of there. As you can see, the two men sort of feasting on the driver. Kind of lucky that the door just shut again. And now the WHO has come in to take control of the situation. And the doctor's calling for martial law. So now Montreal is under martial law to try to get the epidemic and the virus under control. And they're calling it a rabies virus. Of course, apparently, this is also a reference to something that happened in the 70s where Prime Minister Trudeau, not Justin Trudeau, his father, called for martial law in Montreal because of a terrorist group, not necessarily because of a viral infection. So apparently, that's what this is a reference to with the martial law to take care of the virus. And of course, there is a vaccine card. And unless you have this card, the military can take action. So, best to have those cards. And now Reed and Murray are allowed to get back into the city. So, they've been given the shots, and now they have permission to go. Although, like the gentleman said, it may not protect you from the crazies. And here we are back at the apartment. Very nice shot of the apartment, I'll say. Again, bit of nudity in the film, but as I've said before when talking about the 1970s with film, it's definitely more the wild, wild west. And here is what I'm talking about when it comes to a Christmas movie. And here you see the police armed with somewhat automatic weapons as they stand guard. And there he is, Old Saint Nick. This is why Rabid is a Christmas movie. There may not be snow, but there's a goddamn Santa Claus. So I present you with Christmas movie to add to your Christmas watching list. Of course, not really a lot of Christmas decoration for around Christmas time. I don't know if it was customary for that in the 70s. Again, there's a lot of things that I'm comparing to the 70s because I don't know what 70s things entail. I didn't grow up in the 70s. I was born in the 90s. So here we have Rose finding her next victim, as it were. And of course, we kind of see that he's trying to hunt for his next sexual encounter, but little does he know that he's about to become a victim of vampire feeding. Or will he? Because the infection has now run rampant and many people are infected. And of course, in the 70s, you could smoke indoors. Although, to be fair, you could do it in the 90s too. And of course, Pharmaprix is the French name for Shoppers Drug Mart here in Canada. So in Quebec, they're all called Pharmaprix. So yeah, here we see our friend being attacked by an infected. So Rose doesn't quite get to have her food. And nice blood effect there, nice gore effect. And then he's trying to run away. And of course, head right for Santa, shooting the tree. And of course, he also kills Santa. What a heartless bastard. What did Santa ever do to you? So Santa is now dead, and everyone is rushing out of the mall. And the police officer is reeling that he is not prepared for that. And sort of, they're both having this, guess what crazy thing happened to me? And of course, because Rose wasn't able to feed, she's feeling the effects of having no blood in her system. And so she's feeling pain, and she's feeling she just doesn't know what to do. And she's still feeling sort of remorse for having to drink the blood of people. She doesn't quite know yet that she's responsible for the infection. But when she does, she's going to, although she's starting to figure that out, so she's also feeling remorse about that. Of course, it's rather dark, and I don't know what time they got out, so it's a little bit odd that they are coming in. And here we see martial law being in full effect as the military has now come into the city and having these checkpoints set up. And of course, people are trying to comply and making sure they have their ID cards and not trying to cause any trouble. But of course, the infected are out in force. I was going to say out in full, so it kind of transformed into fools. Yeah, so this guy is not obeying anything. The military is just not taking any shit. Although he wasn't infected, he was just not listening to the rules and thought he could get away with it. But no. But the military is taking no chances. And here we see these garbage trucks, which we will find out are used for cleaning infection and also picking up the dead. As these people are in full hazmat suits as well. And gas and respirator masks. I was going to say gas masks, but I don't think they're that, considering a gas mask would also probably cover their face or their eyes. And so now they have the plan of attack. They're going to head to Murphy's house, see what's happening, and then they are going to go pick up Rose. Well, not them. He's going to give them the keys to the car to go pick up Rose. Weird shine effect. You can kind of see that that was a camera reflection. Again, not too much of a detail or something that can take away from the movie, of course. Just something noticeable. And of course, the two go their separate ways. Yeah, so they also have that kind of plan to go back to the house. Fortunately, his plans aren't going to go well. Yes, thanks for the car. Again, it wasn't quite known if he had his driver's license or if driver's license were changed because r- being able to ride a motorcycle is very different from driving a car, and you actually need two different licenses. So, kind of, sort of funny that he assumes that he knows how to drive a car. But of course, driving a car is a bit easier than driving a bike. So now Murray is looking for his family. And the silence should be a bit of a problem, should be a bit of a sign as he's starting to put a little bit of two and two together. Because the silence shouldn't be a thing, but is. Can't see a thing, but he's about to get a shocking scene. Or sight, I should say. He's starting to put two and two together. Things aren't what they seem. Proceeding with caution, though it may be a bit too late. Because you can't really escape the infected. So here we have the mobile spinning. And all those stuffed animals. I wish I had that many stuffed animals when I was a kid. Hell, I wish I had that many stuffed animals now. Oh, but I don't. And then he sees it. He realizes that he sees the blood, and so he now knows that his child is dead, and he doesn't want to believe it, but he knows if there's blood leaking from change table that they've been hit. The realization really setting in, and the shock he's going through, and opens it up, and you just see all kinds of blood, and now he's in grief. He didn't want to believe it, but it happened. And then you hear his wife sort of making noise in the back. Don't open the closet, as she pops out of the closet to attack him. So hopefully they don't come back to the house. That's going to be a bad time. So she's caring for Rose. She's thinking she has a fever, so putting a cloth on her head and just trying to, again, care for her friend. They really care about each other to the point where they would do anything for the other, such as Rose not using her as a food source. But of course, Rose is very hungry and knows that she needs to feed, and the pain is becoming too unbearable. So she's going to try to sneak out. It is a bit odd that she needs to eat so frequently or feed so frequently. You think that she would maybe be able to last maybe a few days or something like that, or a day or two at least. But no, it seems that she has to feed every few hours now. Although it's been hard to say how long it's been since she went out to the theater and then been to the mall. And again, he's just driving through with no issues at this point, and then crazy people running. People running in traffic. That's nothing new. Even in 2021. Or even in 2019 before we had a pandemic ourselves. And here we see the theater as she's heading, as he's heading to the apartment complex. And he's seeing the dead bodies just lying in the street. And this infected just running right across the car. And like I said, the military is out in force. So, and they're not taking anything lightly. They just want to clean the car, disinfect it, and then let him go on his way. I think that would be a shocking scene, and they're just telling him to go, and that everything's okay. Again, it doesn't look like they have anything over their eyes, but it's quite possible that they've got some sort of shielding over their eyes, but it's hard to say. But definitely not wearing a gas mask, that's for sure. So some sort of respirator. And here we see Rose trying to sneak out. She hopefully can, however, there is a small problem. And that's the fact that the kitchen is right next to the door. Rather unfortunate circumstance, circumstance. Because, of course, she's going to look right. Yeah, so she's saying that she doesn't want to feed on her, but unfortunately, Rose needs to eat. And she's feeling intense pain. Unfortunately, a nice hot bath would be nice, but it's not going to fix the issue. So we know what has happened at this point. Right as he's showing up to the apartment. And here we go with the climax of the film. As he reaches the floor and heads the apartment. All he wants to do is make sure that Rose is safe and that they can get out safely together. And surprise, she's the one that's been causing all this. course, I didn't realize that the door was unlocked. And now she's trying to say that it's not her fault. And he comes to the realization that it is her fault. You're the reason for the infections, Rose. Hundreds. Are you sure not thousands? Sort of an overreaction here. I wonder if she could have eaten blood from blood packs rather than having to suck it directly from humans. And of course, now they're arguing as she's like, no, it's your fault because you're the one who got me into this accident. So there's sort of this unrationalization as they're both kind of going crazy. Rose runs away, but again, trying to catch her. Now they're in the stairwell. And again, sort of fighting and just pushes him down the stairs where he hits his head against the wall. And, of course, she just doesn't know what to think at this point. But she's also kind of hoping that he's knocked unconscious and still alive. So she checks on him and then runs away because she doesn't want to hurt him either. She wishes that she didn't have to hurt anyone. But she has to do what she has to do. So she runs, grabs her coat, and just tries to find somewhere as fast as possible. Hit the button. Go as fast as you can. And here she is running down the stairs in the lobby where she meets her next victim. And they have a polite chat. That's a lot of mail, by the way. I also understand that in the 70s there's no email or anything. But holy shit, that's a lot of mail. So now she's playing off that she didn't do anything to Mindy, and that Mindy's perfectly fine. But we all know that she's, unfortunately, killed Mindy. Although not quite yet. And Reed has awoken, probably maybe with a concussion, or maybe some sort of other head injury. I would presume concussion, because he looked to have hit his head pretty hard. And it looks like those stairs are also metal stairs. But I could be wrong. So Reed is just trying to get back up, get his wits about him, and also find Rose. Now, weirdly enough, he goes back into Mindy's apartment, but Mindy's in there. So there's a potential that he could get bitten too. And he receives a phone call from Rose. And Rose is scared that she'll get hurt, so she's staying with her victim to see if she gets eaten or not, and to prove that the infection is not her, that it's something else. She also might think that because she causes the infection, the infected won't attack her. Unfortunately, young Rose is in for a shock. A very big shock. And of course, trying to reason with her to get out of there and to run away as fast as possible. But she refuses to because she thinks she'll be fine, and she's trying to do this as a way to prove that nothing will happen. Because she's not convinced that she started it. She knows, but she's in denial, so she wants evidence that she's okay. And of course, here we see him starting to rise. And everything is not okay. And of course, he's now becoming hysterical because he knows that she is not safe and that she's in great danger. Of course, it's weird because neither of them are talking about his danger because he's in Mindy's apartment and Mindy has been infected. And so now, Hart is going to hear her murder over the phone. As they're both afraid. Oh no. And she's been. And he just loses it and destroys the phone. That poor phone. What did the phone ever do to you? Also, it's a bit odd that nobody comes in and tries to check on him as he's been screaming. There's been a lot of screaming in that apartment. So here we are, the next day. We don't know if he's still alive because we don't see anything. The only thing we do see is this dog trying to eat at something. And of course, it's Rose's corpse. So Rose has been killed, and we just see this truck pull up. And they just pick her up and throw her in the back of the dump truck. And that's how the movie ends. A rather bleak ending, to say the least, that our sort of main character ends up dead. There is no final girl. There is no sort of victory in that somebody is walking away with a happy ending. It's straight up sad, depressing ending as they close the trash compactor on her and we get the credits rolling. And of course, I've been calling Reed throughout the whole movie, but his name is Hart Reed. So I've been saying his last name the entire time in case there was any confusion. Anyway, that's the end of Rabid. I hope you have all enjoyed this commentary track, and thank you for watching.